Greetings, everybody, my science fiction diehards out there. You're listening to the Voidlight podcast, number one. I'm Anthony Penhall, science fiction writer. You can find my stories, including my anthology Sub-Zenith, on Instagram at Voidlight Fiction. And I'm here with my co-host, Kostas.
Hey guys. Hey, I'm Kostas Pantoulas. I'm a comic book artist. I work for titles like Lost in Space, Uptown Chronicles, and 21st Century Men. You can still find 21st Century Men Indiegogo in the description below. And let's start with the first podcast, with the first episode.
So, for this podcast, we're going to be diving into sci-fi as a genre, and specifically something like space opera, and hopefully we'll learn a little bit.
We don't know everything.
Yeah, we don't know everything. This is our first podcast, so
Yeah.
it'll be a little weird until we have, more of you guys pressuring us. So,
Yeah.
we'll get there. So I think one of the easiest, most accessible places to start with sci-fi and with space opera in general, just inclusivity, would be Star Wars. Everybody
Yes.
knows Star Wars. It's a cultural phenomenon. It's taken this definitely, the last decade by storm, with things like Comic-Con, with things like Star Wars Celebration, with the countless movies they're coming out with now.
But many people don't know, and I also don't know the complete history. Before all of this, before Star Wars, everything started with, for George Lucas, I think, with Flash Gordon. The thing about Flash Gordon, if we go before Flash Gordon, everything started with John Carter, Burroughs books, the pulp science fiction stories with this hero on another planet. From what I know, it's the first space opera hero, science fiction hero ever created. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think so, but that's the archetype.
Yeah, and I think a really really important part of what made space opera and respectively what defined the archetypes that were later refined in Lucas's Star Wars was things like Flash Gordon himself.
Yeah.
Originally just a football player. He's just a dude who gets thrusts out into this adventure, where he's on different planets, and
Yeah.
I think
Also,
that,
it's like an acid trip back then.
yes,
It
yeah,
is.
it's
Yeah.
very psychedelic, and it definitely
Yeah.
comes at that age where there's a lot of interest in that, especially with just I would say the golden age of sci-fi was kind of born out of that, that era.
It's a weird thing, man, because I was just typing Alex Raymond on Instagram. It's my favorite comic book artist. For me, it's the best comic book artist ever existed. And I find something like I don't find so many posts. Yeah, that bums me a lot because Alex Raymond. I'm going to talk about the artistic side and the visuals. So
Yeah.
I know I jump from John Carter and go to Alex Raymond and Flash Gordon, but I want to say some things about it. Yeah, and then I'm going to go to you. So from what I know, for example, we have the American comic books, superheroes, science fiction, etc. Whatever you want. So you've got guys like Joy Kubert reading on his 12s. Flash Gordon on the newspapers. They want to be like Alex Raymond. You have Neil Adams growing in Germany in a military family after the war. I don't remember the town. Reading Flash Gordon want to be like Alex Raymond. You have there are so many. The biggest comic book artist in the American comic book industry ever, they were like kids that they want to be like Alex Raymond.
Yeah.
That's why to me, and also some other, like Hogarth and other comic book creators For example, Hogarth, it was the one that started the heroic mythology with Tarzan on comic books. It wasn't the funnies or just a simple story or a gangster story. It was the first story that we see, a hero like Hercules and others.
And let's give a little bit of background
Yeah,
into what the archetypes are, just for people who aren't familiar. With the deep dive into that sort of world. So the archetypes were originally they stem from ancient myths and dream states, but they were originally proposed by I believe Swiss psychologist Carl Jung with
yeah,
his psychological studies. And from things like Greek myth, from things like dreams, from things like religion, he was able to pull these figures, these archetypes that were reoccurring, and that they always brought a sort of in some case divinity, but a purpose to their role. And that
yeah,
pattern is expressed throughout films such as Star Wars, such as Lord of the Rings, and just through daily life. So um just to go through Star Wars, you have Luke, you have the hero archetype. He starts from nothing, and he goes out on a journey,
yeah,
rising up to greatness, whatever that greatness might be. It's different for everybody. It's different for every hero, but that hero archetype still remains the same. You have the mentor. You have Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's there. He's nurturing to Luke. He's teaching Luke about the follies of the Force, but also how to the true wisdom, the true lessons, you can gain, and that's what helps propel you, and it's what helps propel
yeah,
the hero. And then another recognizable, obviously, would be the Shadow in someone like the Emperor or Darth Vader, who is obviously predominant archetype in many other films. Sauron, Voldemort from Harry Potter. These are just defined patterns that we could easily recognize in many things, mostly in literature and the arts and stuff like that. But
yeah. So how do you want to explore, first of all, the idea of the hero in the science fiction mythology? If it's movies, comics, pulps, books, whatever.
I think, like I was saying, the best inclusive place to start, I think, would be Star Wars. Everybody
Yeah,
knows the story of Luke. Everyone who's I would say a big sci-fi fan.
yeah,
And so just kind of outlining, we will be outlining the first movie roughly, but these are the steps of the journey. And
yeah,
this is kind of from memory, so little hazy details might find themselves in there. But from just base level, the hero archetype, we have Luke Skywalker. He's a farm boy. He's on his home planet. Um, it's kind of a trope that is overplayed a lot. Not in this case, but in other cases where the hero has lost something. And for Luke, it's his parents. So he has those guardian figures there that are, you know, uh, Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. But his true, I would say, identity, his true lineage is kind of lost to him. So
yeah.
he really starts at kind of a below baseline almost.
Actually, he's in safety
Yeah,
where every journey starts, and
yeah,
makes sense. Also, it's the same thing with when you have a child and it's on the school and you protect the child and you protect it as best as you can. But then the child have to go outside to the world, the
yeah,
danger.
absolutely. And that speaks to a bigger philosophical issue. And make no mistake, the hero's journey and the archetypes can definitely be and are therefore to be reflected upon on life. They can
Yes.
describe the journey we go through, as we live. So in saying that, when we're always safe, when we're never pushing the boundaries, of what we can achieve, we won't achieve anything greater. So if Luke was to stay on Tatooine, being a farm boy, he wouldn't become the hero that his archetype embodies.
Yeah, he will also grow up harmless. Uh, he will not be dangerous to real threats. Maybe to some threats in Tatooine, because it was kind of a rough planet, but not fighting an entire empire.
I
That's
think,
a great kind of skill.
yeah, I think it's interesting to note towards the beginning of the film, Luke mentions something about wanting to join the academy. Now,
Yeah,
I never like understood whether he wants to join the Imperial Academy or if it's because I would imagine the rebels don't have an academy. It's just the rebels. You're part of
rebels.
the and you're not.
Yeah,
And so to me, that sort of I want to be a part of something. I want to belong. And so there seems like there's a deep sense of something's missing, and that's where that is something enough to drive the hero forward, or at least there's a motivation there. Is that
yeah.
I want more than this life, and that's something we see um, with heroes like with like Frodo from Lord of the Rings, or help me out with some examples here, like
Yeah, there. I will. Okay, I have some other thoughts. I want to comment on something you said before. So I have that weird thought. Um,
oh, we love
it's
weird
from
thoughts.
yeah. Let's do this. So let's get kind of messy to so we can pump ideas. So okay, compare Luke Skywalker to Al Pacino on the first movie Godfather. Why? Why do that? Does make sense, but I think it makes sense because um, you have a difference with those two heroes and some similarities. Similarities, the fact that they feel, and also you feel for them that they don't belong in that environment. Okay,
Yeah,
and at the end, Pacino became the Godfather, and Luke became kind of a new Jedi. Am I right?
yeah,
So the difference is that in the gangster movie, the hero he does not want that, but Luke Skywalker does not know what he wants, but he's really curious about taking the journey. The weird thing about a more crime story, maybe I think, it's that the hero to start the journey, things are getting really messy. That's I think for me it's one of the reasons why Godfather is such a great crime story, because it's the archetypical for a crime story. Things have to many people have to get killed, all your families, or something big have to
yeah,
happen so you can start the massacre. But on a science fiction. On a science fiction story, things can be much more romantic.
yeah,
The good guys are the good guys. They're not gray.
yeah. No, and that's the thing with something like Star Wars, and that kind of goes back to defining the space opera genre in general. Is there's no ambiguity about what's going on in the world.
Yes.
There's something to be said about The Last Jedi, and maybe we can come back to that as far as that theme goes, because that was touched on a bit. But in Star Wars, you always have a sense of whether you believe in the rebels, or you believe in the Empire. There's always a sense of good and bad. You know,
Yes.
the Empire clearly feels oppressive, even on Luke's home world of Tatooine, where it's desert.
Yeah, it's
You
the
have
nowhere.
Mos
Yeah.
Yeah, you have Mos Eisley Spaceport, which is scum and villainy. Uh, and even there, the Empire has its grasp,
Yeah,
and
that's
so that's
crazy, man. Yeah.
yeah,
I,
absolutely, and that
it's the ultimate evil, the ultimate dictatorship. It's an amazing thing
yeah,
what Lucas did. He take the last planet far, far away. Nobody cares. And he put troopers all over the place, in a place full of gangsters of space.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was yeah, you're right, man.
And I think that speaks to a deeper like involvement. Like there was a lot of symbolism of fascism
And also he used antithesis, the
yeah,
opposite. But yeah,
like
yeah,
there was there's allegories to World War II,
a
which
lot.
coming out at that time was crazy. We had World War One, and that was the biggest
Yeah,
kind of stirring in the world, and then we had someone rise up, within our lifetime, or within our parents' lifetime, who was the ultimate icon of tyranny, who was subjugating lots and lots of people to you know uh oppression and things of
it's
that nature.
imagine it's. Uh, I'm not sure. I'm not from the US, but I think Lucas, he's a baby boomer. Am I right? I think. Yeah. So he grew up. My point is that he grew up with, and we know that, with documentaries from World War II. It's not
Yeah,
even that. He grew up in the Cold War, that you can say it's the Third World War, which it
yeah,
is. It's the two powers creating civil wars and fighting civil wars for communism and capitalism, etc. Whatever. I'm not getting into politics, but um, imagine the shock back then. Want to be a storyteller, entrepreneur, etc. No internet back then, and
yeah, yeah,
most of the documentaries playing things about Second World War,
yeah,
things that you forgot about the First World War, and also you have all those years new documentaries that talk about and another massacre that we not documented, and another thing that happened, and another thing that happened, and also have the USSR and American imperialism, Soviet imperialism, and all that battle. It's like it's why I think everybody knows that Philip K. For example, Philip K. Dick's writing, it's like that. It's so tense, and you feel the oppression because that
yeah,
generation, the oppression, the psychological oppression, the oppression that we feel right now. It's a different one. We don't know who the enemy is. So
yeah,
I'm guessing that the new storytellers, they are going to have a different approach. Maybe the biggest enemy is the really bad individual. I don't know, but we have an idea of someone that it's oppressing, but not somebody like Hitler or Stalin. Something like that big.
yeah,
We have. Sorry for interrupting. We have. I'm trying to find. Uh, we have really big companies with no face. That's
yeah,
scary. It's like Psycho with Hitchcock, the scene with the knife. You don't see the face. You see the knife. You don't see the wounds. You see the blood on the floor.
yeah, yeah.
That's not.
So you're seeing the repercussions of a very of a quite oppressive power, but you're not seeing the face. There's nothing to tie such a
Yeah, yeah,
such a powerful force to, you know?
yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. Okay, if we take that thing,
And I think
that psychology, and put it in the storytellers of tomorrow, I'm trying to guess
y-
the next science fiction, archetype of a hero, the next Star Wars. He's going to trying to fight what? Because Star Wars copying, the fascism, but what he's going to fight?
and that's the thing. I think the reason that people like Philip K. Dick, and especially Obviously, I don't. A forewarning. I don't think we'll ever get through a podcast without mentioning Blade Runner. Or
Yeah. I don't
specific.
get to the bathroom in the morning brushing my teeth without thinking Blade Runner. It's some lights
Yeah,
which they remind me of. I'm joking.
and specifically talking to something like the source material, "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?"
Yeah.
There is such an oppression in that, and it's
Yeah.
not. The reason these were such visionary writers, in my opinion, is because they were pushing the boundary. So as, let's say, Philip K. Dick, as compared to Lucas, Lucas was using this narrative of oppression, this narrative of tyrannical power,
Of
and he
clear
was,
oppression. Clear, very clear enemy, very clear oppression.
yes, and he was maximizing it to the scale he thought it could possibly take. I can't speak for what Star Wars holds personally for him in his own psychology, but I can to think of, we have something like World War II, but it is encompassing the billions of star systems in the galaxy.
Yes.
That scale is mind blowing. Even with a narrative as simple as it's the Empire. Well, it's the Empire, yes, but it's the Empire controlling nearly every star out there. No matter where you go, no matter where you run, you're under its thumb. And I think, as opposed to Philip K. Dick, he saw it, in the universal scale, he sees it much smaller. Even if it's just
Yes.
nearby star systems, it's mostly just, the outer world, the outer planets, but on those planets is such a vision of life where we're so far removed from what makes us human, from the
Yeah.
humanity. So towards the beginning of "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep," um, Rick Deckard is talking to, I don't remember the female's name. It's not Rachel. Rachel Rosen, I believe, is her name in the book, rather than Tyrell. But they're talking about dialing. So they're using uh, the the Penfield uh, mood organ, I believe,
Hmm.
and they're dialing their emotions, and so they're having this fight. And Rick says, basically, don't make me dial for the both of us, kind of thing. Like, we can dial all day, we can argue all day, we can control our emotions, but you know nothing is gonna happen. And so the woman responds, like, I don't need this right now. I have 6 hours of depression on my schedule. And he says, why would you do that? I mean, what that defeats the purpose of the organ, is to program yourself with depression. And she, her big response basically is like, it feels so far removed from humanity to feel alone and to be happy, to dial in, to happiness when everything around you is so
Yeah.
dark, so oppressive. And I think where Lucas took that simple theme and spread it across the universe, Philip K. Dick chose a much deeper existential problem within humanity and facing humanity now, even, and spread it really close to home. And I think
Yes.
that's why it touches so deeply with us, especially nowadays, with technology.
Yeah. That's why. For example, you see Black Mirror. It's a different, series from the perspective of Philip K. Dick in some issues, but in some others, it's very close. I'm really confident to say that, for example, the Electric Dreams, the series from the science fiction short stories of Philip K. Dick, started because some producers just saw, or a director saw Black Mirror, and he was like, "Oh, Black Mirror sells like hell. It's amazing. Everybody's watching it. Let's do those amazing Philip K. Dick stories because we have the rights." And why Black Mirror rocks? Because it's amazing. It's awesome, and it speaks about all those things that you just said.
Yeah, and I've really got to say, I was just before we spoke, I was watching Night Flyers, which is something that's kind of been in my brain
Haven't seen it.
space while they've been marketing it. Written by Game of Thrones writer George R. R. Martin. And first of all, I love when a writer that becomes, or I mean, he was popular before, but becomes popular in the minds of, you know, global civilization for one thing, like fantasy, like hard Game of Thrones, you know, like,
Yeah, he's a sci-fi
but
writer.
yeah, but can easily just flex his muscles and get out into something like space horror, which I love and isn't not done enough. You know, for me,
Yeah,
the shining examples, Alien and Dead Space,
Alien. Yeah.
and he takes it to a new level because of the mystery he's able
Huh.
to
Have to watch
write
it.
into his stuff.
Amazing. Space horror. It's like where when did you first see? I know we're getting outside of the points, but where have you? How old are you when you first saw Aliens? Sorry for my English.
Um, hmm, what was that? It was definitely like sometime. I'd seen it earlier for sure. I've seen it earlier, but
Like 10 years old,
the
12. I was
so
close to
yeah,
that.
yeah. I would say probably
Oh
10 or
man.
11. And then once I was probably about honestly 17 or 18, rediscovering it was almost like watching it the first time because you're picking
Yeah.
up on a lot of stuff. Intelligence, intelligently, you weren't able to pick up as a younger, child, like you're picking up not only on a lot of themes, but a lot of what makes it's scary.
Yeah.
You're out in space, you're isolated. There's no one around you, and there's no one that's going to help you for miles and miles and miles. So it's this greater sense of isolation that really drives,
I
this.
think we have to get this point and get it closer to space noir. Also, your help to close some things about the space opera. Star Wars. It's very easy to catch on it,
Yeah.
not because it was built to be mainstream.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a discussion that we used to have some days ago. It was because it was it came from a creator. That's why Disney fails.
Yeah.
One mind from his spirit. He was kind of an artist on that, for sure. So, what do you think the next Star Wars? Completely different. I'm not talking about the sequels of the sequels. It start becoming really boring. But the next space opera, the next trilogy, the next Star Wars, or I don't know how many movies, is going to be like, and why? From
And
the problems that we're facing now, how we're going to explain them in a space opera.
so it's hard for me to answer that, so I'll cheat a little bit. I'll
Yeah.
use my own perspective. So, right now, or kind of how I see Sub Zenith. Um, for me, that's me looking into the future. That's me exploring what are going to be the visions,
Yes.
but also what is the important tale that we're bringing out of the future. And so, Star Wars was look at this fantastic universe, look at all this technology, look at this future, look at what we're capable of, but these problems still exist. And so for me, the slip space colonies is like a virtual reality, and I see transhumanism as something we're edging closer to, especially with
Yes.
AI, with just medical technologies. We're getting closer. We're asking a lot of the questions that these science fiction writers were asking back then, about their future. We're approaching them now, and it's a lot of the people who aren't wrapped up in science fiction are just now starting to hop on board and understand.
Everybody.
Yeah,
Everybody, it's
yeah,
getting crazy.
it's
I
getting
love it.
crazy. And so, for me, I think the next logical place, the next frontier, so to speak, is digital reality. I think
Yeah.
that's something to be taken quite seriously, as far as while we might live in a simulation now, and we can definitely get to that at some other point, because that's a whole nother bubble, so to speak. But
It's in another podcast. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a very difficult one.
I,
It's
I
a very
think
difficult one. So I think that okay, the new space opera, it has to have the heroic element for sure.
yes,
A hero
that
with a thousand faces, etc.
has to.
Uh, when you first said Star Wars, I start rambling about Alex Raymond and Flash Gordon because it's my favorite character ever and my favorite artist ever. I will go back there, of course. I want to say something else about the mentor. I like to play with those antitheses. Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's a very mysterious guy,
Yeah,
but he's the good guy, the good mentor. An amazing thing happened with Flash Gordon. If you read the old 30s comic books, the mentor it's Dr. Zarkov,
yeah,
and at the start he's the guy that kidnaps them and they go to Mongo, etc.
yeah.
The baddest guy ever, man. He's like
It's
the
kind of like
main scientist, and then he became something like an angel. It's like what?
it's like
But I,
Yondu from Guardians of the Galaxy. Like he's an
oh,
awful,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but he's great.
yeah. But
He
yeah,
loves Peter Quill.
that's what happened in 3 pages.
Yeah,
But I really love Flash Gordon because the kidnapper, the guy that forced them with a gun, in the first page, go to that rocket, those amazing Art Deco rockets. And they went there, and he's like the worst guy ever. He's the villain because you have to have a villain. And then he became the good guy. I really like that. The idea of the mentor being the villain, and then because we are the great thing about it, we are in a different planet. We are the only humans, and they want us as slaves. We are three people, and they
yeah,
want the woman as a woman for the emperor, the 100th woman. I don't know.
uh,
So things sucks really. They're
yeah,
really bad. It's like like an invasion. So you have the amazing thing you have in your mind that Dr. Zarkov, he can be very evil. He can be evil. You have that on your mind, and he's like, I'm the good guy. You know, but that's great for storytelling. I love that.
absolutely. Yeah, I think there's an important duality to things. Like the reason I find archetypes so valuable is you don't just have to have the hero, the mentor, the
Yeah,
shadow. Your hero can equally be the shadow of your story. Your
yeah.
archetypes wear
The
different masks.
yeah
You know?
the bad guy can be your mentor. That was my point.
Yeah,
The really bad guy can be the mentor, the one that help you grow up.
yeah. I think that duality also transfers to themes. So we're trying to find an inlet into something like Cowboy Bebop with like space noir, and I think
Yeah.
going back to what I said about space horror, and so this is where you could see kind of a paradigm shift. Is it's that sense of isolation in
Yes.
things like Cowboy Bebop, in things like Alien, and things like Ghost in a Shell, though it's not quite in space, you have the same sense of isolation. And so Cowboy Bebop, you have these places, you have all these planets, these locations, but they're all isolated. They're
On a
in
small
space, which as a larger context really helps to separate things. But everything seems like it has its own problem. Like you can't escape one thing for something better,
Everything is
because
broken.
you still have you still have either humanity picking up the pieces of itself, or a humanity tearing itself apart just naturally by existing, just
Yeah.
not quite ever reaching its peak.
I believe in Chris Claremont's method. Let's go for a little bit to X-Men. You have your heroes uh, getting destroyed every page, emotionally breakdown. I mean, the worst things happen to them. I'm really positive that if X-Men were real, they will not go to Chris Claremont and be like, "Oh, Daddy," they will be like, "Ah," they will attack him, and that's it's a hard thing to do because after a while you feel like it's kind of your child's of your imagination. Of course, you're not crazy, but they're not your children. But you have to torture them to
Yeah,
grow, and they're fake, fantastic heroes, etc. So you see that in Philip K. Dick, you see it in Chris Claremont. Yeah,
I think that's really important things for writers. It really in all, I would say in all writing, as far as character based narratives are go, some writers are really afraid to put their characters through
into
hell.
the yeah,
Yeah,
they're like angels. Yeah, nobody can
they,
touch
they
them.
they're like, oh, my character's so good. And I'm
The video stacks.
definitely
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
definitely responsible for this. They have this grand story, but their hero, even if they started from nothing, they're never really quite getting enough conflict
Yeah,
to blossom into that amazing hero they could be.
yeah,
And I think that's why that is why it's kind of interlinked with becoming such a mythic figure,
yeah,
is that you're encountering more than a normal person should take, as
yeah.
the
I want to say that I'm really proud that you are you are my editor on Psychia and my comic book, and I'm kind of fan of those guys like Chris Claremont that they really destroy and Jodorowsky that they really destroy their characters. And you saw it in Psychia, the comic book on my site, and uh, I really find it very interesting to what Jodorowsky use for their destruction and resurrection. Also does it on his movies. He cuts body parts of them. So
yeah.
the most brutal thing that you can do as as a writer. I think one of the most brutal. Um, I most of the time, and also in some old comics I did, the more like crime stories. I want I got kind of the easy way, but I'm very good at drawing people crying. On all the other things, I don't know if I'm good, but I know how to make them cry. So if they
Yeah,
have an emotional breakdown and it hurts like a knife on the heart, you don't have to, traumatize them really. Because you can cut their arm and it's going to be horrible. But if you in the next panel see them and they are like, oh, I'm okay, doesn't matter. But
there's not
yeah,
an
that's
emotional
my
base
point.
to it. Yeah,
Yeah, the emotional
and
breakdown. It's like it's the same thing with your generation, my generation. We're living that thing that is going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It does not happen. That fear of the unknown, because we did not get tough earlier because
yeah,
life was easier. So I think it's a good asset to invest on that because emotional breakdown of a character, everybody feels that way.
it's life,
Yeah,
it's death, and it's resurrection. And in those four stages, you have quite a powerful statement and journey for the character.
yeah,
explain your comic a little bit and what.
It's not a space opera. It's very close to chaotic sci-fi, the theme of my latest uh, paintings and drawings for the 1.5, 2 years, something like that. I don't know. I don't remember.
Into
So
you. What do you see chaotic sci-fi?
okay, so we have a discussion about some things, and I want to draw my line, and I'm really happy that you are maybe you're the only writer that understand what I want to do with chaotic sci-fi, and you find also many ways to go further, point other things with sub-zenith. I thought that it will never happen to me that I'm going to find a writer that he's going to write chaotic sci-fi
Yeah.
kind of style of stories. I really miss those psychedelic science fiction
Oh man.
themes and
Yeah.
things. They are like, man, seriously, you don't need to do drugs. They are bad for your health, but you need to do psychedelic science fiction comic books as soon. I mean, I remember, for example, even if you go to the mainstream, like Cosmic Cube of Jim Starlin, um, my greetings to Stone Nick. He knows why. He's a big Jim Starlin fan. There are some things like when Captain Marvel, the old one,
Yeah.
destroys the Cosmic Cube. Some really weird things happened. When he explored the universe, where he's getting in the negative zone. It's crazy, and because it's a story and a superhero story, they explain why. You know, what I do with chaotic sci-fi, it's I take the explanation of maybe Jim Starlin also had to give the explanation all the time, and he did the best amazing work ever.
Yeah.
But I don't use so many words. I use my storytelling skills.
Yeah.
With your help editing the my book, it looks much more better because my English they are not that good. But I want
Well.
the mysterious stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I was telling you about a movie called From Panos Cosmatos. It's a must for me. Called Beyond the Black Rainbow. You see things happening. You don't understand why. Not every pieces of the puzzles are there.
And they don't need to be at
Yeah,
first.
yeah. You're like you're giving the ticket to the viewer, and you're like, okay, isn't it funny to just take the other pieces from your mind, from your imagination, and put them to the story, to what's happening, to this world? Why do you have to explain everything? I heard once a story. I'm not sure that it's correct. That Kubrick and another director talking about Spielberg when he was young, an amazing director, no doubt. But Kubrick said something like he's explaining everything.
Yeah.
The old directors they did not give a fuck if you know everything. They knew, but the point is that you don't have to know everything. That's why cinema it's becoming more dumb. The mainstream cinema and series they became better. They explain those that they explain everything. They fail actually. They have to keep the suspense, so they play with this. But in a 2 hours, 3 hours movie, you see explosions, they explain everything. You don't care, but you will care if there is a 3 hours movie like Star Wars, a new space opera, or a space noir, that they don't explain everything. It's the same thing that we said in the podcast, the zero episode, 000.
Hmm.
That in Total Recall, the reboot,
Yeah.
it's so more of the you're going to see cyberpunk everywhere, and we are going to push the
Spectacle.
CGI. Yeah, spectacle. Yeah, yeah. So you will feel more happy. No, I just need one chocolate. If I eat chocolate for 1 month, I'm going to die. Stop it. You know, it's too much. Yeah, that's the point. It's too
Yeah.
much. It's like the book. In the book, you have the words, and the words make your brain, work much more better because you take your memories and your archetypical type of description that you give and hero, and you play with it, and there is no play when you saw everything. That's why films does not feel like books anymore most of the time.
Yeah. And that isn't to say you can't show the things that are important. Often
Yes.
referred to, um, Alfred Hitchcock said something about the difference between surprise and suspense. And so, and I'm sure many people have heard this. When you have people sitting around a table, baseball, and they hear a ticking, and so they we see the bomb under the table, and they reach out and they grab it and they throw it out the window and it explodes.
Yeah.
Well, that's surprising. It's a surprise because where did that bomb come from? Who put that bomb there? And then let's double back. So what if you have a scene and these people are sitting around the table, they're all talking about baseball. Objective camera shows us the bomb,
Yeah.
and it's ticking and it's ticking and it's ticking away, but they're all still talking about baseball. Well, you can play with that information for a good 5, 10, 15 minutes and keep that suspense going.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
I remember that,
you're not
that example. It's
every
amazing.
so we could just close by saying Voidlight Sci-Fi, with this podcast and with the fiction, we're really trying to go for that 70s flash fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, all things android, alien, but really bring that wild, out of this world thinking, because now the sci-fi we have is pulling off of the old stuff. And
Yes.
while the old stuff is something we definitely should build off of, it's
True.
time for some new thoughts about the distant future, because that is the root of sci-fi.
Yeah.
We didn't get here by continually, making spaceships. You know what I mean? Like, we need to capture what's really might happen out there, even if it's the wildest thought. Let's entertain it, and
Yeah.
that's where we might get some magic out of it.
Yeah.
But that's our mission statement. If you enjoyed the podcast, feel free to follow Kostas on Instagram.
For the people that they are going to hear our podcast, you have to visit Voidlight on Instagram, on Tumblr, on Facebook, whatever is the social that you're using. Because every week there is a new short story. I do the cover. Antoni makes amazing stories, and you will get a dose of really true science fiction and art, and you will get much more of the ideas that we have. We are not just talking about it, we are doing it. We want to try maybe to discover it. It's a very difficult task, but that's why we actually doing this podcast, because we discovering things through this conversation.
If you're starting from episode 1, cheers to you. It's this is an
Yeah,
experiment. Hopefully turns into something great. So if
thanks
you're
guys.
sticking with us, continue with it, because you're gonna love it. So